Hey everybody, it's Kenny. I wanted to play a little bit of a David Pakman video first, just to give context. He's talking about a meeting that he had with the White House, and then I'll give my thoughts afterwards. So let's just check out his video.
About. And I think there are some important takeaways here with regard to the next 4 years and so many things that we've all been talking about. So, first and foremost, what was the context of this meeting? I went for a meeting with administration officials from what's called the Office of Digital Engagement. Now, for folks who have been following prior White Houses, there has been no such thing in the past. And so, one of the things I've said that's been notable about the Biden White House is that such an office exists, a group of people specifically designed to be intermediaries between the administration and online creators like me as an alternative to the legacy corporate media being the only media apparatus that is even kept informed about what's going on at the White House or has access to the president. Now, I will give you the good and then the not so good. The fact that it was a group of 10 of us, myself included, were invited was a great thing because it means they understand the importance, particularly in the context of Kamala Harris recently having lost an election in which she did not engage with online media, I would argue, anywhere approximating what should have been done. It's a sign that they understand the importance. It's a sign that they want to build these relationships. And of course, a lot of you are probably saying, but David, they just lost and they've got a month to go. And of course, that's really the problem. And I would kind of explain it this way. I spoke very candidly with everybody about what the right is doing correctly, how they build community. You know, one of the things we've seen post-election is that everybody who has been in the kind of Trump media ecosystem, they're all part of a very clear community. They're hanging out by the pool at Mar-a-Lago. They're obviously going to have significant access to Trump and top administration officials once they are sworn in. Comparatively, I expressed this was not to President Biden. We only had about 15 minutes with President Biden, all 10 of us. But we had 2 hours total, plus then a lunch for a smaller group of us. I expressed my frustrations. As you all know, this is not anything that I've not been public about before, where when we want to have Pete Buttigieg on, the Secretary of Transportation, or when we've asked for interviews with others, we are either ignored or put into a sort of scheduling black hole where you're asked, what questions will you be asking? To which I always say, I'm not going to tell you that. That's not how we do interviews. Can you do it at this one particular time 3 weeks from now? Sure. And then 3 days before, it's rescheduled. And then it's rescheduled again. And by the time we finally get to the interview, everybody's exhausted from the whole thing. They tell you you get 9 minutes. And it's not good for anybody. It doesn't build community. It doesn't give us an opportunity to actually build relationships with these people. Nobody's happy with the interview. It doesn't do well. And it just benefits nobody. It's just an exercise in frustration. Contrast that with Charlie Kirk texts Trump. Charlie Kirk texts whoever. Now, I'm not saying give me Biden's cell phone number, but the point is we are so far from the idea that we need to do community first and then let's figure out the details. They were extraordinarily receptive. And yet, the Harris campaign, which is a different entity, I think it's important. A lot of people may not know the president and vice president, separate staffs. They are not working in concert the way some might imagine. They're not a unit in the sense they really have their own things. And the Harris campaign completely failed on this. And I was extremely clear and candid here as well. So there is certainly a bit of a too little too late from the
In a couple different ways. I'll say this: David Pakman is probably the most YouTuber that you'll find. and it's clear that like his motives when he's even having an interview. I've seen interviews with him with pretty much conservatives, even liberals, anybody in the political spectrum. That it's a certain level of arrogance and ego, and he's talking down to he thinks he's smarter to manipulate. It's a narcissistic type of view that he has. It's very obvious. In this case, I wanted to use that clip as an example of how he's being paid to have his opinion, and it shows. If Trump and those guys offered to pay him, he would go on the other side. The thing is, he's worked his way so much to the left that he can't really he pigeonholed himself essentially, and he tied his rope to the wrong horse. It's funny watching him and Destiny and some of these online personalities, I would say, talk about topics. There was another video I saw, him and Destiny talking, and what they were speaking was projection from their side. And I don't have a side. I didn't vote. I'm just an innocent bystander in the political sphere. I'm not a big Trump fan. I'm not a big and really in that, but watching them, there's a couple thing takeaways that I see that don't I don't understand how people don't notice this, but most of the time he talks, he looks away from the screen. He can't look in the camera. And that shows a lot about what his intentions are. If he was legitimately giving his own thoughts, he would be able to look into the camera. It was the breakdown with him and Destiny. I'm gonna try to throw that clip in here too at the end. Watch how they're both looking to the side and then saying a point. Looking to the side, saying a point. Because they're reading talking points. Um, this was actually very telling too of why what was the selection process of individuals that got the opportunity to go to the White House and talk to the president. And it's very interesting how now they're separating themselves away from Kamala Harris because she lost. When about 2 months ago, it was Team Kamala Harris, and that she was doing a fantastic job. It's very interesting. Why again? I didn't vote. I'm watching this from the outside. It was very interesting watching how both sides operated. It was very clear to me that the right was going to win, and it was because of how they were engaging their voters, engaging their populations. David Pakman and the Destiny types are just gaslighters. They're just gaslighting, gaslighting. It's almost unbearably narcissistic how they talk to their audiences. And this got exposed, and Tim Pool exposed that Luke guy on his show when he just Luke where Tim just when it got to January 6th, Tim just went in on him. And it shows that these people don't know anything. They're just talking in surface level talking point. I realize that a lot of my liberal friends that I have, they don't know what they're talking about at all. They know the general mainstream view of every topic that they talk about, but they don't know anything underneath that level or of anything. And it started, and I didn't notice this at first, and it started with COVID, where I was like, this stuff is on the surface. Like, y'all didn't watch Dallas Buyers Club? They're talking about like Fauci's a bad guy in that movie. Like they don't say it by name because they made it get pulled out, but Dr. Fauci was who was the bad guy at Dallas Buyers Club, and every bad actor and bad character that's easily identifiable. And I know with the autism and with the ADHD, I can kind of see stuff a little bit different and see through stuff a little bit easier. But what I realized is they didn't want to do any research. They didn't want to know more. They didn't want to know deeper. They didn't want to hear it because it separates them from the cult that they're in. And it's cult on both sides, yes. I would say the liberal side is a death cult, though. and it's a narcissistic death cult that's spiraling right now. And that's what you're seeing and you saw with the election is a death cult spiral because they really have no power, no control. And it starts with the self control and the self awareness. David Pakman has no self awareness. He thinks that I saw when he went on PBD, right? And PBD ended up having to hand him his ass. And PBD is the middle of the fences you can get. Like yes, he's kind of right, but he's kind of on the right. I mean, but he's a businessman. That's why he's on the right. And you can see he has some liberal values, but PBD isn't one that's gonna just destroy you because he tries to play fair with everybody. And with David Pakman, what he does is he asks questions, and he'll never give you an answer to a question because he's a gaslighter. And what Destiny does, he tries to talk super fast. Like my thing is, I have ADHD too, so I can talk really, really fast, and I purposely slow it down so that I can get my thoughts out effectively and not emotionally. And Destiny can't have a conversation without getting emotional. Um, I would love to debate either of them or just talk to either of them. Not even debate because I don't debates are pointless at this point. Just have a conversation with either of them, um, and see what they're about, like a Joe Rogan type conversation. Because when I listened to the Destiny and David Pakman conversation, they were talking about how the right has no values, how they have no stick points of what I can tell you exactly what the right feels. I can tell you nothing about what the left actually feels because it's a group of liars. That's the thing with the scheduling is like we can't get a hold of them for meetings, like he says in the video I just posted. In this, the reason why you can't get rid of the video is because they're liars and their opinions change depending on what the situation is. I only see that on the left. On the right, I see more of actually solid opinions and solid uh, I guess ideas, and they change depending on how the scenario changes. On the left, it's more of they have no solid opinions, they don't believe anything, and the things that they say they believe, they only believe because the rest of the cult tells them they're supposed to believe it. And I think that the David Packmans of the world and the Destinies and that Luke guy that was on Tim Pool's show are doing a very doing a service to the mainstream people, not mainstream news, the mainstream everyday person that actually watches that shit. It was when I was talking. They were talking about with Destiny. He was on the podcast with somebody. It was like something about some coffee or that's the name of it. It was two guys, and they were talking about how the left has no influence. And the thing that I realize is most people aren't on the internet like that. Most people don't know who Destiny and those guys are, and that kills their ego. Like if David Pakman, people not knowing who he is, the biggest way to destroy guys like that, and because especially playing sports and being in academia and real life, I've learned like the people with those type of egos, the biggest way to bring them down a peg is to act like you know nothing about them. And don't also just ask them questions and don't let them redirect the question. And you don't have to do it forcefully, but when you talk to them, you almost have to play dumb, and they'll fall for the trap every time because of their ego. It's just interesting watching how these guys maneuver, and I just don't understand what audience they have or who's their. I don't understand who's their key demographic. I don't. I would guess it's the liberal elite. Because even the laptop class kind of sees this shit for what it is now. They have to at this point, and it has to be the rich trust fund babies that don't really have jobs, that aren't in the real world, that aren't interacting with real people. It has to be their audience at this point. And how many people is that really? You are in the minority of the minority. The Destinies and David Pakmans and those guys are the minority of the minority now, and I don't see how they actually even function because or make money. That's why they go to events like this. But it's very interesting that they only got 15 minutes with Biden, and you see he just kind of skimmed over the condition that Biden's in. Because I've been asking for a long time, for the last at least 4 years, maybe three and a half. I'll give it like a half a year. Who's running the country? Because Biden clearly is a senile. This can't come out pretty much full go. And also, what is this? What are they? They have like 20 something days left. What are they? What messaging do they have left? This is the lamest of a duck series. So very interesting that that meeting was held is interesting too. I wish we would know the names. I can guess it's Rachel. I guess it's him, Kyle Kalinske. I could probably name it off the top. Um, you know the crew. No, I don't think they would trust Destiny because Destiny's a wild card of behavior because he's so emotional and he's so unhinged. Like a lot of these people are truly it's mental illness that I'm watching. Um, Especially with Destiny. It's mental illness and it's just unhinged in general. And they don't care about figuring out the common ground, the through lines, or like what the actual situation is. They're concerned about winning the debates, and that's a very key difference in how people kind of maneuver. Is they care more about winning the debate than actually figuring out what's the root of what we're talking about. And it's interesting, man. I'm glad that the whole Bernie Sanders thing happened in 2016 and kind of disaffected me from politics because I feel bad for people like that are left or right, even on the right. Because I say people that think Trump is gonna come in and change. He's a businessman. He's already partnered with Bezos, and you see that Amazon strike, dunzo. All you got to do is go talk to him, grovel at his feet, and then he will change what you need him to change. And who has access to him? People with money. So it's Trump was the oligarchy. Kamala Harris was more the dictators coming in um, that don't believe in free speech, that don't believe in any conversation. If I got rich today, I could have access to Trump. If I got rich today and Kamala Harris was there, they still would not fuck with me because I'm not part of their cult. It is a cult. It doesn't have a name, but it is a cult. And that's the thing I think people really need to understand that cults have been a thing throughout our history. And the people in power have always been in cults. Think of Game of Thrones. The they fought in the Winterfell fought with the different like places in there, but they were all at the end of Game of Thrones when they said, "Hey, Sam said, "Hey, how about we let the people kind of decide?" They all laughed because it's a cult they're in, and David Pakman is a part of the cult. He's super disingenuous and just a bad person overall, and it shows. And that sweater was so weak. You need a wardrobe and a stylist, my guy, because that sweater was trash. Uh, the New York liberals ruined the world. Point blank. Period. That's what I realized. The New York and San Francisco liberals ruined the world. Not too much we can do about it, but kind of just wait the storm and see what happens. But what do y'all think? Do y'all think that David Pakman and the Destinies and that personality type on the left, do you think that they actually have an audience or all their numbers are being inflated? I would say it's more of their numbers being inflated than actually having an audience. All right, y'all. It's Kenny Campbell. I'm out.